The crystal ornament slipped from my mother's hand and burst against the hardwood floor, tiny shards scattering like the composure she'd spent 62 years perfecting. 2 years, she kept repeating, as if saying it enough times would rearrange the facts into something she could tolerate. Under 2 years. But standing in that living room, surrounded by garland and candlelight and the wreckage of her assumptions, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not guilt. Not the familiar shrinking I'd practiced my whole life. Just a quiet, steady, calm, like the first breath after a very long time underwater. My name is Maya, and I am 34 years old. I drove to my parents' house on Christmas Eve the same way I'd driven there every year, with dread sitting in my chest like a stone. The neighborhood looked the same as always. Colonial houses with matching wreaths, driveways full of expensive cars. Everything curated and coordinated and suffocating. I sat in my car for a full 3 minutes before going inside, which was already an improvement over last year, when it had been 7. Inside, the house smelled like pine, and my mother's signature pot roast, and the particular brand of tension that only my family could generate while being technically festive. My sister Renee was already there, of course. Renee was always early, because Renee did everything right. She sat on the couch with her husband, a cardiologist named Greg, who had been welcomed into our family like a returning hero. Their daughter, 4 years old and dressed in a velvet dress that probably cost more than my first car, was arranging the presents under the tree with the seriousness of a surgeon. My brother David sat across from them, his fiancée perched beside him, showing my mother photos on her phone of venues for the wedding that was still 11 months away. My mother was leaning in with genuine delight, nodding, touching the screen with one manicured finger. She didn't look up when I came in. My father did. He raised his glass slightly, a gesture that landed somewhere between acknowledgement and obligation, and went back to the football game. I hung up my coat, poured myself some sparkling water, and settled into the armchair nearest the window. For a while, nobody addressed me directly. I watched the snow falling outside and thought about Daniel at home, probably on the couch with our dog, a golden retriever named Pepper, already texting me, asking if I wanted him to come pick me up early. Then my mother called everyone to the dining table. She had set it beautifully, the way she always did. The good china, with the silver trim. The cloth napkins folded into birds. The centerpiece of white roses and eucalyptus she'd ordered from the florist she'd been using since before I was born. 12 place settings, even though there were only 8 of us, because my mother believed in the visual impression of abundance. She'd put me at the far end. The meal started fine, the way these things always started. Compliments on the pot roast. A debate about the best ski resorts in Colorado. Greg explaining something about cardiac stents with the casual authority of a man who had never once doubted his welcome at any table. My mother laughed at everything he said. Then Renee mentioned, purely in passing, that she and Greg were looking at a new house, 5 bedrooms, a yard for the kids they were planning to have next. My mother put her fork down and pressed both hands to her heart like she'd just received word of a miracle. That is just wonderful, she breathed. A real family home. She looked around the table with the soft, meaningful expression of a woman delivering a sermon. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Roots, stability, choosing the right foundation. She paused. Her eyes landed on me. Maya, you're still in that apartment? I'd been eating my green beans. I set down my fork slowly. I am, I said. That studio. 1 bedroom. Right, the 1 bedroom. She said it the way she might say the homeless shelter. You know, your lease must be up soon. It might be worth really thinking about what you want your life to look like by the time you're 35. There's no shame in reassessing priorities. Renee glanced at Greg. Greg took a sip of wine. I've thought about it, I said. Have you? My mother tilted her head. Because honestly, sweetheart, I worry. I don't say this to hurt you. I say it because I love you. You've spent your whole 30s well. Most of them so focused on this career. Her firm is doing incredibly well, my father said, without looking up from his plate, which was the closest to defending me he'd come in about a decade. I know that, my mother said, with the patience of someone who found facts inconvenient. And I am proud of her work. Truly. But a building you design is not the same as a life you build. At some point, Maya, you have to decide what matters more. Greg proposed to Renee after 14 months. David and Nicole got engaged after a year and a half. She gestured down the table. These things don't just happen. You have to be available for them. Emotionally. Structurally. Structurally, I repeated. You know what I mean. I do know what you mean. She softened her voice the way she always did when she was about to say something she knew was unkind, but wanted to frame as wisdom. Sweetheart, you're 34. I know that feels young to you. It didn't feel young to me. I had both of my children by your age. She paused for effect. I'm not saying you need a baby tomorrow. I'm saying the clock is real. Your grandmother always said that a woman who won't make herself available for love shouldn't be surprised when love doesn't come knocking. I looked at her. I thought about Daniel's hands on my face the morning of our wedding. I thought about the way he'd cried when I walked down the aisle, ugly, unself-conscious, unbothered crying, and how his mother had leaned over to me afterward and whispered that she had never seen her son look at anything the way he looked at me. I thought about the house we'd closed on, in September, the one with the wraparound porch, and the study with the big windows where I'd already set up my drafting table, and the bedroom that Pepper had claimed as his own personal domain within the first 20 minutes of moving in. I thought about the ring I was wearing on a thin chain under my sweater, because I'd done that every year I came to this table. Hidden myself, made myself smaller, walked in as a question mark instead of a period. Actually, I said, I think I need to tell you all something. Renee looked up. My mother's expression shifted to the careful blankness she used when she sensed incoming disruption. I reached under the neckline of my sweater and lifted the chain over my head. The ring caught the candlelight as I set it on the table. A simple gold band, worn and warm and real, sitting among the silver-trimmed china like an honest thing in a room full of performance. I've been married for 2 years. The table went completely silent. Not the polite silence before a toast. The kind of silence that has weight to it, that presses against your ears. My mother stared at the ring, then at me, then at the ring again, as if the order she looked at them might change what they meant. I don't understand, she said finally. His name is Daniel Kowalski, I said. He's a firefighter. We got married on October 14th, 2 years ago, in a ceremony at his parents' farm in Vermont. About 40 people were there. People who'd known us, known both of us, for years. His father walked me down the aisle because I knew I stopped. Took a breath. I knew this family would have made it about something other than me getting married. My brother David leaned back in his chair. You kept this secret for 2 years. I kept myself safe for 2 years. That's not. He looked at Nicole, who looked at her plate. A firefighter. My mother said it quietly, like she was tasting the word and finding it insufficient. That's a wonderful thing. Of course. But sweetheart, his family owns a farm. In Vermont, yes. About 90 acres. His dad raises horses and his mom teaches elementary school, and they are, without any qualification, the warmest people I have ever sat across a dinner table from. My mother opened her mouth. They ask about my projects, I said, every single time I see them. His mother has a folder, an actual folder of articles about buildings I've worked on. His dad drove 3 hours to see the community center our firm finished last spring because Daniel mentioned I was proud of it. They ask follow-up questions. They remember the names of my colleagues. They celebrated when I made partner the way your family celebrates Renee's husband's promotions. Like it was the most natural thing in the world to be proud of a woman for her work. The silence came back. Different this time. Renee said, carefully, why didn't you just tell us? Why the secrecy? Because of this, I said. I gestured at the table. At the arrangement of it, Renee and Greg at the center. My mother at the head, me at the far end. Because the year I made partner, Mom's response was to ask if I thought the longer hours would make it harder to date. Because when I bought my apartment, Dad's first question was whether the building had families in it, as if that was the relevant data point. Because every single time I have accomplished something, the first thing that happens at this table is someone finds the cloud inside it. We were concerned, my mother said stiffly. You were embarrassed. There's a difference. I kept my voice level. It wasn't hard. I had been practicing this, in my own way, for 2 years, maybe longer. I brought Daniel to Renee's birthday 4 years ago, before we got serious. He fixed a pipe under the sink that had been leaking for a month because Dad mentioned it offhand and Daniel just quietly went and handled it. And after he left, the first thing you said, Mom, was that he seemed like a very nice man. And the way you said nice made it clear it was not a compliment. My mother looked at the centerpiece. I just thought you deserved. What? A cardiologist? A lawyer? Someone you could mention at book club without having to add context? I leaned forward slightly. Daniel has carried people out of burning buildings. He has performed CPR on a 7-year-old in a parking lot and watched that child walk out of the hospital 2 weeks later. He coaches youth hockey on Sundays, and he visited my grandmother every week her last year when her memory was going, brought her flowers, sat with her for hours, learned all her stories. He has never once made me feel like a project to fix or a deadline to manage. Greg cleared his throat. Still, 2 years is a long time too. I'm not actually asking for your opinion, Greg. He blinked. Renee put a hand on his arm. I looked at my mother. When Daniel proposed, we were on a hike we'd done a dozen times, up this ridge near his family's farm. He didn't have a ring yet. He told me he'd been carrying the question for 6 months and couldn't wait anymore. He said, "This is the part I want you to hear." He said that the only thing he was sure of, more sure of than anything in his life, was that I was exactly who I was supposed to be. Not a future version of me. Not a more available or less ambitious or less opinionated version. Me, right there on that ridge with mud on my boots and my hair in a ponytail. My mother's eyes were bright. She looked away. His mother cried for an hour when we called her. Happy crying. The kind where she kept apologizing for crying and then crying more. His father got on the phone and said, "You're ours now, kid. Welcome home." His little sister immediately started talking about what role she wanted at the wedding. Nobody asked about my timeline. Nobody mentioned my age. Nobody calculated anything. My voice caught, slightly, on that last part. I let it. Do you have any idea what it is like to be welcomed without conditions? The table was very still. We also bought a house, I said. In September. 3 bedrooms, wrap-around porch, big yard for Pepper. Who is Pepper? Our dog. We've had him for 1.5 years. My mother pressed her fingers to her lips. The house is 12 minutes from Daniel's fire station and 20 minutes from our firm's downtown office. The study has north-facing windows, which is what I've wanted in a workspace my whole career. Daniel built me the drafting table that's in there. Actual woodworking, with his own hands, because I mentioned once, probably 2 years before we got together, that I'd always wanted a custom one. He remembered. He always remembers. I paused. We're also expecting. 14 weeks. Due in June. The sound my mother made was not a word. Renee's hand went to her mouth. David sat very still. My father, at the other end of the table, set down his fork with a careful, deliberate click against the china. 14 weeks, my mother finally said. It came out thin. Daniel's mother is already knitting. His father converted the smaller barn into a wood shop specifically so he can build the crib. I kept my eyes on her. They are beside themselves. In the way that makes you feel like the pregnancy is a gift to everyone, not a checklist item. His mom sends me articles about nutrition. His dad calls Daniel every Sunday to ask how I'm doing, not how the baby is doing. How I am doing. My mother stood up. She walked to the window and stood with her back to us, one hand resting on the glass. Outside, the snow was still falling, steady and indifferent. You should have told us, she said. The anger had gone out of her voice. What was left sounded older. Smaller. I tried. I said. Not the specifics. But I tried to show you who I was. What I wanted. Every time I did, there was a correction waiting. A comparison. A suggestion that I was doing something slightly wrong, just by being myself. I never meant to make you feel. I know you didn't mean to. That was true. And saying it out loud felt important. I don't think you ever meant to. But intentions and impact are not the same thing. You built a table where there was always a right way to be, and I was never it. So I built a different table. One where I was enough, exactly as I was, and I've been eating there for 2 years, and I have never once left it hungry. My father spoke. Maya. His voice was rough. Where does that leave us? I looked at him for a long moment. He had aged in ways I'd stopped letting myself notice. His hair was mostly gray now. His hands, wrapped around his wine glass, looked like an older man's hands. That's up to you, I said. Daniel's parents are having Christmas dinner tomorrow. His whole family, his sister's kids, neighbors they've known for 30 years. Loud, messy, 3 conversations happening at once over food that's been cooking since yesterday. He told them tonight, just before I left, that he was hoping to bring his wife's family. His mother texted me 10 minutes ago asking how many seats to set. I pulled out my phone and showed my mother the text. My darling Maya, please bring everyone. The more the merrier. Extra pierogies are already on. We have been waiting to meet them. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. My mother read it twice. She calls you sweetheart, she said. She has, since the second time I met her. Renee was crying quietly, which I hadn't expected. She wiped her face with her cloth napkin and didn't look at Greg. I'm sorry, she said, to me, not to anyone else. I should have, I saw how it was. I didn't say anything. I know, I'm really sorry, Maya. I know that too. My mother turned from the window. Her mascara was intact, because my mother had always had exceptional mascara discipline, but her eyes were red at the edges. She looked at me the way she hadn't looked at me in a long time. Not assessing, not comparing, just looking. I would like to meet him, she said. Your husband. I'd like to. She stopped. Started again. I'd like to try to do this differently. That's not my call to make alone, I said. That's a conversation you'd have to have with both of us. Together. She nodded. Slow, deliberate, like a woman accepting the terms of something she hadn't negotiated. I stood up and picked the ring up off the table. I slid it back onto my finger, where it belonged, where it had belonged for 2 years, and felt the familiar rightness of it settling there, the weight of something real. I'm going to go home, I said. Daniel is waiting. So is Pepper. I looked around the table, at my sister's wet eyes, at my brother's unreadable expression, at my father's old hands, at my mother's careful stillness. Tomorrow's invitation is open. You don't have to come. But if you do, and I mean this, you will understand immediately why I stopped apologizing for choosing this life. Because 1 hour at that table, and you will see exactly what I was protecting. I got my coat from the hallway. I put on my scarf. At the door, I paused, not because I was uncertain, but because there was one more thing. Her name is Clara, I said. That's what we're calling her if she's a girl. After Daniel's grandmother, who passed last year, she was a schoolteacher for 40 years and apparently the most stubborn woman in 3 counties, and his whole family says I would have loved her. I felt myself smile. I think they might be right. I stepped out into the cold. The snow was coming down harder now, softening the neighborhood's sharp edges, quieting the street. I sat in my car and let myself breathe. Then I texted Daniel. Coming home. Have Pepper at the door. I need about 20 minutes of just the 3 of us before I can be a person again. His response came before I'd finished putting on my seatbelt. Already at the door. Hot cider on the stove. You okay? I looked at those 3 words for a moment. Yeah, I typed back. I think I really am. I drove away from that house with its perfect wreaths and imperfect silences. The streets were quiet in the way that only Christmas Eve streets can be. The whole world in a kind of suspension between what was and what might be. I thought about my mother's face when she read that text. We have been waiting to meet them. I thought about what it cost nothing to say and everything to mean. The lights were on when I turned onto our street. I could see them in the front window, Daniel standing there with Pepper's big golden face pressed beside him against the glass. Both of them watching for my headlights with the same uncomplicated patience. I parked and got out and didn't walk. I ran. The way you run towards something when you've spent a long time walking away from other things. He met me at the porch steps, and Pepper nearly knocked us both over. And the 3 of us stood there in the falling snow, in a tangle of arms and fur and cold air, and I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time since I'd pulled into my parents' driveway that evening. How bad? Daniel asked, his chin on top of my head. Not as bad as it could have been. Not as good as it should have been. I pressed my face against his coat. I told them everything. He was quiet for a moment. Then, how did it feel? I thought about the ring on my finger. About Clara, who was not yet Clara but was already, somehow, entirely herself. About the drafting table in the study and the wraparound porch and the 90 acres in Vermont and a woman named after a stubborn schoolteacher I would have loved. Like putting something down that I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten I was carrying it, I said. He pulled back to look at me, thumbs brushing snow from my hair. My mom is going to lose her mind when she sees you tomorrow. She already texted me about the pierogies. She started the pierogies at 4 this afternoon. She says the secret is an hour minimum of resting time for the dough, which she tells me every year as if I might forget. I want to learn, I said. I want her to teach me. He smiled, and it was the same smile I had watched through the window of a coffee shop 3 years ago, and the same smile on a ridge in Vermont with mud on my boots, and the same smile in a farmhouse kitchen while 40 people cried happy tears, clear and steady, and entirely without condition. We went inside. Pepper settled across both our feet on the couch. The cider was sweet and warm and smelled like cinnamon and cloves and the specific happiness of a house that knows it is a home. Daniel told me what his sister had said when he called her, and how his father had immediately proposed 3 different names for Clara that were all variations on family names going back 4 generations, and how his mother had cried and then apologized for crying, and then cried again at the apology. She says hope costs nothing, Daniel said, and that your family might surprise you. She said that before. She means it every time. I looked around the room. The wedding photo on the mantel, me in a simple ivory dress, barefoot in the October grass, holding a small bunch of wildflowers his mother had cut from the garden that morning. Daniel in his father's old suit jacket, laughing at something I'd whispered right before the photographer clicked. The bookshelves we'd built ourselves over a weekend with his dad's tools and a lot of wrong measurements and a good amount of laughing. Pepper's chewed up tennis ball in the corner that neither of us ever moved because it made the room look lived in and loved and real. I put my hand on my stomach, just briefly, just to feel it. 2 years ago, I had stood on a farm in Vermont and promised my life to someone who had never once asked me to be anything other than exactly this. A woman who designed buildings and had strong opinions and got attached to golden retrievers and came home to cider on the stove after the hard nights. I had not told my family because I knew what they would have done with our beginning. They would have had opinions about the venue, the dress, the guest list, the last name. They would have asked questions designed to measure Daniel against a rubric he was never meant to fit. They would have found the hairline cracks in every good thing and called it concern, called it love, called it wanting the best for me, when what they actually wanted was something they could display at the right angle. So I had protected it, protected us. The way you cup a flame against the wind, not because the flame is weak, but because some winds do not care what they extinguish. And we had grown, quietly, in private, into something that needed no protection anymore. My mother might call, she might not. She might show up tomorrow at Daniel's parents' house and stand in the doorway of that warm, loud, overcrowded kitchen and understand in an instant why I had stopped asking for her permission to be happy. Or she might not be ready for that yet. But I had left our address on the hall table. The real one. The house with the drafting table and the wraparound porch. Not the apartment she thought was my life. I had left it there the way you leave a door open, not an obligation. Not a demand, just a possibility. The rest was up to her. Hey, Daniel said quietly. He was watching me. Hey, you want to tell me what you're thinking? Or do you want to just sit here for a while? Both, I said. Can we do both? He shifted on the couch so I could lean against him. Pepper rearranging himself accordingly with the long-suffering flexibility of a dog accustomed to being worked around. Outside, the snow was still coming down. Inside, the cider was warm and the lights were low, and somewhere in Vermont, Daniel's mother was probably still in her kitchen, adding chairs to a table that had always had room for more. I thought about my grandmother, the one my mother's family had dismissed as sharp-tongued and difficult, who had once told me in the kitchen while we rolled dough together that the secret to a good life was finding people who would rather understand you than correct you. I had been 23 then, and hadn't fully known what she meant. I was 34 now, and I had a husband who had remembered an offhand comment about a drafting table for 2 years before building it with his own hands, and a mother-in-law who kept a folder of my work, and a daughter whose name was already picked from a woman we were honoring by trying to be half as stubborn and certain as she had been. I understood now. The wedding my family hadn't attended had been perfect in ways I couldn't have planned if I'd tried. The marriage they hadn't known about had given me 2 years of practicing what it felt like to be loved without a scorecard. And the child coming in June would grow up in a house where nothing about her would need to be hidden, improved, or explained before she was welcome at the table. I finally stopped waiting for my family's version of me to match the one I'd always known I was. I was already home. I had been for 2 years. And there was cider on the stove, and snow on the porch, and tomorrow his mother was making extra pierogies just in case, because that is what people do when they have decided, without qualification, that you belong.